All right, welcome to my class again, and here we are, and we're going to be clarifying some things about time zones and the international date line. I'd like to go through this quickly, but if you need to go back and rewind, remember you can always do that. All right, when I was younger, I used to teach latitude and longitude on a flat map. I used to teach it as latitude, fatitude, longitude, elongitude. And the reason I taught it that way was anybody who knows anything about fashion knows that you never put a horizontal stripe around the belly of any shirt that you want to buy. Why? Well, a horizontal stripe will make you look fatter. So think of Santa Claus. That's about the only suit I can think of that has a horizontal stripe going around the belly, right? Because we want a fat Santa. You guys have watched Rudolph before. We want a fat Santa. Well, fatitude, latitude. Latitude lines tend to go across the page from the left side to the right side or from west to east. However, lines always divide. They measure north and south, correct? Latitude lines measure how far north or south you are. When you cross the goal line in football, okay, you're going through the line. The entire line is the goal line, right? And it's separating the field from the end zone and the playing field, which is vertical. But the line is going horizontal or across. Longitude lines, if you know anything about fashion, if you're going to have, for example, if you want to look thinner, you tend to have inserts along the sides of your shirt or swimsuit, for example. A lot of swimsuits do this. They have like a little vertical stripe going down the side. And the reason is that is slimming. It elongates you. It's a visual trick. Well, longitude, elongitude. In other words, they go long. Longitude lines, even though they are going from the North Pole to the South Pole, are not measuring how far north and south we are. They are measuring or separating how far east or west of the prime meridian we are. We learned about that in the last video. Time zones run in the same direction as longitude lines, and they tend to be about 15 degrees apart. The reason for this is because there are 24 hours in a day, and there are 360 degrees east and west, 180 in the western hemisphere and 180 in the eastern hemisphere. 24 divided into 360 is 15 degrees. At the 180 degree east and west line, or roundabout, is an imaginary line on the Earth's surface where the date changes as one travels east or west across it. This is called the international date line. This line, the day literally changes once you cross it. For example, let's say you are in Alaska. And just for the sake of discussion, let's pretend like you're a preacher. There are actually two islands in the Bering Strait called the Diomede Islands. And the Diomede Islands, one of them, Little Diomede Island, belongs to the United States. The other one, Big Diomede Island, belongs to Russia. Now, I'm going to tell a fictitious story, but there is a Little Diomede Island that belongs to the United States and a Big Diomede Island that belongs to Russia. Everything else I'm going to say is a fictitious story to get you to understand the international date line. I want you to pretend like you are a preacher and you get up Saturday morning and you get in your boat and you row west across the international date line from the Western Hemisphere to the Eastern Hemisphere. And you land on Big Diomede Island from Little Diomede Island. When you get there, it is no longer Saturday, but rather it is Sunday, because in Russia, it's a day later. So what does a preacher do on Sunday? Well, you go preach, right? And you preach, and the people on the island, they're there, and you attend church, and then after church, you get back in your boat, and you row back to Little Diomede Island. Now, if you know anything about pastors, if there is a day off for a pastor, it's Monday. And so after preaching all day, you would expect to be able to get up and have a lighter day. But not you. Why? Because you're back on Little Diomede Island. And when you wake up the next morning, it's not Monday, it's Sunday again. See, when you come back, when you go east across the international date line that separates the eastern hemisphere from the western hemisphere, you now lose a day. That is how the international date line works. For most of us, time zones are important because of where we live in the United States. There are 6 time zones in the United States, 4 of them in the contiguous 48 states. First off, you have Alaska time and Hawaii time, and they are in the far west. For the sake of discussion, we'll talk about those later. But starting where you live, we live in the Eastern time zone. And the Eastern time zone, if you move 1 time zone to the west, you are now in the Central time zone. So pretend like it's 1 o'clock when I'm talking right now. If it's 1 o'clock where I am, 1 o'clock p.m., if you go to the Central time zone, it would be noon there. For example, 1 o'clock in Parkersburg is the same time as noon in Chicago, Illinois. If you go another time zone to the west, that is Mountain Time. Mountain Time is 2 hours behind us. We are in the Eastern time zone. So, if it's 1 p.m. in Parkersburg, it is noon in Chicago. In Denver, Colorado, it is 11 a.m. Then you have the Pacific time zone. The Pacific time zone is actually 3 time zones, 3 hours behind us. So, for example, if it's 1 p.m. here, it's noon in the Central time zone, it's 11 a.m. in the Mountain time zone. Out in Los Angeles and San Francisco and San Diego and Seattle, there in the Pacific time zone, it is 10 a.m. Now, Alaska time is another hour. So that's 9 a.m. there when it's 1 o'clock here. And Hawaii is even another time zone over. So when it's 1 p.m. in Parkersburg, it is 8 a.m. in Honolulu, Hawaii. When you move west, from west to the east, you now add an hour. So let's pretend that it's 1 p.m. in Los Angeles, California. Well, what time is it in the Mountain time zone where Denver, Colorado is? That's right, it's 2 o'clock. What time is it in the Central time zone? Well, you're right again, it's 3 o'clock. What time is it here? It's 4 o'clock. Louisiana is located in the Central time zone. West Virginia is located in the Eastern time zone. So, if it's 4 p.m. in Louisiana, and they're singing the old Jimmy Buffett song, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, that somewhere is actually here. Because if it's 4 o'clock in Louisiana, it's 5 o'clock in Parkersburg, West Virginia. What time zone is South Florida located in? Find Florida on the map. It doesn't say Florida, but you should know where Florida is. That's right, Florida is in the Eastern time zone. What time zone is California located in? California is in the Pacific time zone. Undeniable. That's right, they are in the Pacific time zone. What ocean is closest to the Eastern time zone? Now, it's not listed on this map, but you should know that the east coast of the United States is along the Atlantic Ocean. Very good. All right. Each time zone differs by 1 hour. What time, if you look at the clocks, should it be in the Pacific time zone? Very good. It should be 4 o'clock. If it's 10 o'clock in the Eastern time zone, what time would it be in the Mountain time zone? That's right, it's 8 o'clock. If it's 10 o'clock in the Pacific time zone, what time is it in the Eastern time zone? That's right, it's 1 o'clock. Well, I hope that helps. Again, time zones, if we move west, we subtract an hour. If we move east, we add an hour. The international date line, if you go west from the Western Hemisphere into the Eastern Hemisphere, you add a day. If you go from the Eastern Hemisphere and move to the Western Hemisphere by traveling east across the international date line, you subtract a day.